everyone. My name is Estefania, and I want to share an anecdote that is quite intense for me, but which I was looking forward to sharing with other people outside my family. Every time I tell this story, I relive many traumas, and in a few seconds, you'll understand what I am talking about. However, I also want to hear everyone's opinion. This story is paranormal, but I am not sure if it was something good or bad. It happened in 2015. I am a mother of 2 children who were 6 and 8 years old at the time. Their father lives 3 hours away from where we live, and since we had just separated, we agreed that he would have them during vacations, and I would have them the rest of the year. He always came to pick them up and brought them back to me, but on this occasion he told me he had an emergency and couldn't bring them back. He asked if I could go get them by bus and said he would pay for the tickets. So I agreed. It was either that or leaving my children there. I left on a Saturday night because I had to return with them on Sunday since they had school on Monday. The bus departed at midnight exactly. I was a bit nervous because the roads were quite dangerous due to the sharp curves, and honestly, I wasn't used to traveling alone at night. I don't know if it was because of all that or if I simply sensed that something bad would happen, but I had an unexplainable anxiety in my chest from the moment the bus left. And then a tragedy happened, one I still haven't recovered from. We had an accident on a curve where there had already been too many accidents because of how dangerous it is and how fast cars go by there. I had my seatbelt on, something that almost no one does when they get on a bus. Many don't even know that bus seats have seatbelts. So I was one of the few survivors. The bus started to catch fire, and I couldn't get out. There was so much smoke that I couldn't even see outside. The bus was overturned, but not completely, so I managed to climb up to a broken window to get out. But I was too weak, either because of the smoke or for some other reason, and didn't have enough strength to get out. No one had arrived to help us yet. Everything happened in a matter of seconds, and I was screaming for help to get out as the bus was burning. It was the most horrible moment of my life without a doubt. I thought I was going to die there because there was no one to help me, and I couldn't get out on my own. But suddenly I swear on my life that I felt someone grab me by the arms and pull me out. I fell to the ground and looked around to see who had helped me, but there was absolutely no one. I quickly got up and started running away from the bus because it was extremely dangerous to be there. There was no one around until finally a car stopped to help me and called emergency services. I was trembling and terrified, but very sure of what had happened. I was convinced that someone had pulled me out. So much so that I kept asking the people in the car where the person who had helped me was. But they didn't know what I was talking about and were trying to calm me down, saying that help was on the way but that we had to move a little farther away because it was very dangerous. When the ambulances and firefighters arrived, there was nothing they could do. All the other passengers lost their lives except for me, and I couldn't believe there was no one to even thank for saving my life. I don't know who or what pulled me out of there. It's something I still can't understand. But without a doubt, I am very grateful. My family thinks it might have been one of the previous victims who lost their life there and stayed around wanting to help me so I wouldn't end up like them. It's a crazy thought, but there's no other explanation. This really happened, and I didn't imagine it. It's thanks to that I can be here now, sharing my story with you. Hello, my name is Osvaldo and I am from Durango, Mexico, where this story took place. Everything happened very quickly. It was a night while I was sleeping at home, around 1 a.m., when suddenly my cell phone rang. It was my brother, informing me that my mother had fallen ill and had to be taken to the hospital. At that time, I lived in another city because of my job. My mother had always had heart problems, so she frequently had issues, but my brother told me that this time, she looked very bad. So, I decided right then and there to get up and take a bus to see her because I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't go and something happened to her. I went to the bus station and bought a ticket for the next bus to that city, and the only available one was at 3:30 in the morning, so I bought it. This is where this strange and very eerie story begins. I got on the bus and noticed it was completely empty. I didn't see anyone else get on, so I just closed my eyes and tried to sleep a little since I was very tired from work. I fell into a deep sleep and didn't even notice when the bus started moving. Suddenly, I woke up with a start and saw that we were already on the road. I looked out the window and saw only darkness. I checked my cell phone, and more than half an hour had passed since the time we were supposed to leave. I looked at the other seats and noticed that the bus was still empty, which didn't seem strange to me given the hour. People avoid traveling at night because the roads become dangerous where I live. I called my brother to let him know that I was on my way, and he reassured me by saying that my mother was already much better. But I still wanted to spend the day with her since I had already taken the day off from work. I hung up the call and was about to close my eyes again to try to sleep, since there were still about 3 hours left in the trip, when I suddenly heard someone start whistling. It struck me as odd and disrespectful because it was obvious that people would want to sleep at that hour, even if it was just me. I looked ahead to see who was whistling and saw something that made my skin crawl. There was a guy about 4 seats ahead of me, peeking between the seats, staring at me while whistling. I did feel some fear, but my annoyance at seeing that he was doing it on purpose to keep me from sleeping was stronger. If not, why else would he be looking at me? Without thinking, I told him to please be quiet, and the guy suddenly stopped whistling and just stared at me with a look of malice. I don't know how to explain it, but it was a very disturbing look. And if that wasn't enough, he also started smiling at me. I honestly didn't know what to do or how to react. I couldn't confront him because it could be very dangerous. I didn't want to risk it because the guy really seemed crazy and he never took his eyes off me. No matter how much I tried to ignore him, he kept peeking completely until I lost my patience and asked him what his problem was. This guy started laughing, but in a whispering way. Just remembering that gives me chills. I think it's the most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my life. At that point, I knew that the guy was either not right in the head or had taken something, or I don't know what. But a sane person would never act in such an eerie and disturbing manner. Seeing that he wouldn't stop laughing while watching me, I got tired and turned on the flashlight on my phone. When I raised it to shine the light on him, he ducked in less than a second, just like that, and I couldn't see him anymore. I decided to turn off the flashlight and try to sleep since the guy had gone quiet. So I closed my eyes, but my peace didn't last long. While my eyes were closed, I heard the guy whistling again, but this time much closer. I thought long and hard about opening my eyes. I felt a lot of fear, and honestly, I'm not going to lie. I was scared to open my eyes and find the guy right in front of me or next to me. Besides, I wanted him to think I was asleep so maybe he would stop bothering me. But the guy knew I was awake because he started whistling louder and louder, stopping for a few seconds and then laughing before continuing to whistle. It was something so macabre that I really couldn't take it anymore. I decided to open my eyes and go to the bus driver to tell him what was happening and ask him to do something about this guy, because I feared for my safety. So I opened my eyes suddenly but didn't see anyone in front of or next to me. My heart was pounding because I knew he was there somewhere, and it made me very nervous not knowing where he was. So I just stayed there watching when suddenly I heard that horrible whistle again. But not just that. I also felt his breath whistling on my neck, right behind me. Without thinking for a second, I got up and ran to the front without looking back, alerting the driver to what was happening. My fear was so great that I even sat beside the driver while telling him, and the driver had a look of confusion and told me that I was the only passenger. I felt my heart drop out of my chest from the fear that gave me. I assured him that there was someone else, but the driver insisted that I was the only passenger. I was a bundle of nerves. I wanted to call my brother to tell him what was happening to me, but I didn't want to scare him and worry him more than he already was with our mother. So I held back and just waited by the bus driver until he returned and told me, "Young man, there is no one else on the bus. I checked everywhere, even the bathroom, and there's no one there. Maybe you dreamed it." I really couldn't believe what he was telling me because I didn't dream anything. Everything was so real, and I can swear that to you. But the driver was convinced I had dreamed it, and I didn't want to insist that it was real. So I told him maybe I did and asked him to please leave the light on, to which he kindly agreed. The rest of the trip, I sat right behind the driver, paranoid the entire time, looking around. I really wanted to go to the bathroom, but obviously I wasn't going to get up from there because I now knew that the guy wasn't human, which made it even more disturbing. I finally reached my destination and got off the bus almost running. It took me more than 2 years to tell my brother because I knew he wouldn't believe me and would only make fun of me. But when I told him, his reaction was completely different from what I expected. He believed me and told me I should have told him at the time. Now, I no longer travel alone at night. Later on, I bought my own car and haven't taken a bus in a long time. But I'm sure that if I ever have to, I won't do it at night. That situation truly traumatized me and left me with the uncertainty of what that being on the bus was and what its intentions were with me. Those are questions that definitely have no answer, but I know and could feel that it wasn't anything good. Tonight I want to share an anecdote that happened to me, my mother, and some other passengers traveling with us on that bus. My name is Fernando, and this is my story. My mother and I always traveled during the holidays from Monterrey to Mexico City by bus to visit my older sister who has lived there since she got married. It's a long and tiring journey when you go by bus because it takes many hours. So, my mother and I always opted to travel at night so we could sleep and it wouldn't feel as long. My mother and I were already on the bus in the early morning on our way to Mexico City, like every vacation. I remember my mother was asleep, and I was watching a movie on my phone. We were sitting almost at the back since the bus was full. I checked the time and saw it was almost 3 a.m., so I took off my headphones and turned off my phone screen to try to get some sleep, because I didn't want to arrive too tired at my sister's place. I was just about to close my eyes when suddenly a very loud and piercing scream came from the bathroom. That scream was so loud that even my mother and other passengers who were asleep woke up very scared by what we had just heard. It was clearly a woman's scream. My mother asked me with a frightened face what that was, and I told her I didn't know. Meanwhile, all the passengers were asking the same question and turning to look back. A man sitting next to us asked if we had seen anyone go to the bathroom because he was sure no one had passed by. He said he was awake and hadn't seen anyone walk toward the bathroom, and the last 2 seats at the back were empty. I replied that I hadn't noticed if anyone had gone by or not, but that we had to inform the driver about what had happened because someone might be in the bathroom needing help. No one got up to help, so I stood up. But before I could go to the front to the driver, we heard the woman in the bathroom again, but now she was crying. I walked toward the back. My mother was telling me not to do it, but I went anyway because I thought there might be a woman who needed help. So I knocked on the door several times, but no one answered. The door indicated it wasn't locked, but I didn't want to open it as it would be disrespectful to the person inside. I just kept knocking and asking if anyone needed help, but inside there was no more noise, and no one ever responded. The man next to me got up from his seat and went to inform the driver, and I went back to sit down, waiting for him to come and see what was going on. A few seconds later, I saw them both walking directly toward the bathroom. It struck me as odd that the driver looked annoyed or irritated, as if this wasn't the first time something like this had happened, if you know what I mean. Without knocking or asking if anyone was inside, the driver opened the door, and we could see there was absolutely no one there. We were truly surprised, because we had all heard that horrible scream, and those of us sitting in the back could also hear the woman's crying. The man and I insisted to the driver that we had clearly heard it, as it was scaring all of us. That's when the driver told us in a low voice so no other passengers would hear the following story. It's a rather disturbing tale, but it happened in 2012. He didn't experience it firsthand, but a colleague of his did. One night, while this bus was heading south, a criminal gang intercepted the bus with several trucks, forcing it to stop. My colleague said he told the passengers to stay calm because those men were going to get on the bus. He said everyone stayed in their seats except for a young woman who ran to lock herself in the bathroom. Those men boarded the bus and interrogated several people, but when one of them noticed the bathroom was locked, they started banging on the door, shouting obscenities and threatening to kill everyone if whoever was inside didn't come out. The woman had no choice but to open the door. She was crying uncontrollably and begging them not to harm her, but it was all in vain. They killed her right there in the bathroom while everyone screamed and cried. It was a terrifying scene. They took the body and left, and no one ever knew what happened to the woman's body. Since then, several drivers have complained that they hear screams from the bathroom at night during trips. After hearing that, my mother and I were frozen with fear. The driver only asked us that if we heard it again, we should ignore it and pray for it to go away. Meanwhile, the other man laughed nervously. He said he didn't believe in such things, but he couldn't find a logical explanation for what we had all clearly heard. So, he was also quite nervous. The truth is, I couldn't rest for the rest of the trip. I spent the entire time feeling scared and getting chills, constantly feeling like someone was behind me, watching me. I didn't know if I was just imagining things or if there really was someone or something observing me from behind. It was the worst trip I've ever had. Even after arriving in Mexico City, I couldn't forget what had happened on the way and couldn't stop thinking about the return trip. Even though the chances of us getting the same bus were very slim, I was still very scared. What happened to that poor woman was a true tragedy. My mother still prays for her soul to this day, hoping she can find her way. I agree with those who say you don't believe in these things until they happen to you, because that's exactly what happened to me. Good evening, community. Today I want to share with you an anecdote that happened to me in 2019. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Ramiro Acuna, and I am from Tamaulipas, Mexico. I consider this story entirely paranormal. I've always been interested in horror and mystery, but until that year, I had never experienced anything of that nature myself. I must say that after this, I was never the same. It's something I still struggle to overcome, mainly due to the delicate nature of the matter. It happened on a cold December night. I was traveling for the Christmas holidays to my ranch, where almost all of my family lives. I work in the city, which is about 2 hours from the ranch. That night, I bought my bus ticket for midnight since I finished work at 10 p.m., as I was a waiter in a restaurant. I still had to get home, pack my suitcase, and take a shower before leaving. We left the bus terminal and headed down the road, which is already quite imposing at night in total darkness. For those who live around these parts, you know how tense it is to travel these roads at night, especially due to the crime rate. Honestly, I wasn't scared, but it's hard not to feel nervous in that situation. Even so, my desire to see and be with my family during the holidays was much more important to me. We were halfway through the journey. There were very few people on the bus. I would say there were about 8 people at most. I never sleep on the road because of the nerves, and it's such a short trip that I prefer to put on my headphones and simply look out the window, even though you can't see anything. Suddenly, I felt the bus start to slow down little by little in the middle of the road, where there was nothing. So, I peeked ahead to see if someone had stopped us or if there was a security checkpoint, as there often are on these roads. But I couldn't see anything. Some people woke up and we all looked out the window. We saw 3 young men and a woman standing outside the bus door, asking the driver to let them in. What caught my attention was that these people were wearing summer clothes, which were very torn and dirty. What surprised me the most was that it was freezing outside. My phone said it was 37 degrees, 3 degrees Celsius, and they were dressed like it was nothing, wearing shorts and very light clothing. I observed these people closely as the driver started to drive the bus slowly, and they kept sticking to the door, walking alongside the bus, and still asking to be let in. Suddenly, the driver told us over the radio to close the windows and not to open them for any reason. He then mentioned that we should not pay attention to anything happening outside. My curiosity got the better of me. I was very confused, just like everyone else. Suddenly, the driver accelerated, and those people vanished into thin air. I couldn't even see where they had gone or what had happened to them. It was as if they had simply disappeared into the darkness. The driver didn't say anything else and continued driving normally until we reached our destination. But I couldn't stop wondering what had happened. So, when everyone else got off, I stayed behind to ask the bus driver what had happened on that stretch of road and who those people were. At first, he didn't want to answer me, but I was very persistent, and he ended up telling me something that left me thinking a lot. He told me that other drivers from the company had warned him that on that stretch of road, 4 migrants had been murdered by organized crime. They found their bodies there, in an inhumane manner. He said he stopped because he thought they were people who really needed help, but when they started banging on the door, he remembered what his colleagues had told him, warning him never to stop. That's why he decided to drive away, leaving them behind. He asked me not to tell anyone about this, and I told him not to worry, and thanked him for telling me. Even though, in reality, I couldn't believe it. It was very hard for me to accept it at first. But after looking it up on the internet, I knew it was true because I recognized the woman from the photo. She was the same woman who was with those 3 men, asking to be let on the bus. I would be lying if I told you I remember exactly what those 3 men looked like because, in truth, I could hardly see their faces due to how dark it was. But I did see her clearly, and according to what the driver told me, she had appeared to other buses doing exactly the same thing. It's very sad, and it shouldn't happen. I pray that they will find the road to eternal rest and not continue to suffer on that road for eternity.